Hello and welcome. I am Cyril Stover. Now, India has marked its 74th anniversary as a republic, and in doing so, it reeled out its numerous achievements in various fields, demonstrating why this South Asian nation has earned global acclaim. Now, Nigeria and India have a blossoming relationship in many aspects, not the least in trade. Matter of fact, India is Nigeria's largest trading partner. Now, this partnership comes into focus once again as I sit with India's High Commissioner to Nigeria, His Excellency Shri G. Balasubramanian. A seasoned diplomat, he joined the Foreign Service in 1998 and served in the Indian missions in Washington, D.C., Moscow, and Bangkok, where he was Deputy Chief of Mission. High Commissioner, thanks for joining us on One and One.
Thank you, Mr. Stover. Thank you for having me on the show. And let me say namaskar from India.
All right. Thank you. Well, 74 years as a republic. Would like to know a little bit about this journey, the history and culture, and how India moved on to become a republic. Well, Nigeria is also a republic, but tell us a bit about the Indian experience and background leading to being a republic.
We got our independence in 1947, August 15, 1947. And immediately after that, there was a constituent assembly that was created. And that constituent assembly was mandated with the task of writing a constitution. So it took them 2 years. 26th of November 1949, they finished the constitution and adopted it. And it was a 2-month period that was there. So on 26th of January 1950, India became officially a republic. And the experience has been quite interesting, I should say, because when we got independence, we were a poor country. We had about 330 million people, and many of them were below the poverty line. The strength of the Indian industry was quite weak. We had to perforce go in for something called as the public sector undertakings to bring in economic development. We sought assistance from various developed countries at that point of time and joined hands with them in setting up institutions, industries, and networks and other things. So slowly the journey had started, but India continued to be a stalwart in terms of independence movements and also in terms of democracy that was flourishing. I should at least point out here that India is not only the largest democracy in terms of number, but it is also the mother of democracy. If we can go back a little in history, we have inscriptions running in the 4th century, which very clearly shows us about the panchayat system, in which 5 people in a village were elected to govern. So the democratic credentials and the institutional memory in India had been quite long, and so when it became a republic, it adopted the democratic traditions faster and easily.
All right. Well, and that democracy has grown in leaps and bounds. But we'll talk about it as we go on. But let's look at the many strides that India has had to take these 74 years, and this against the background of its population. You did say at the time you got your independence, and as a republic, you had some 300 million below the. India's population today is over 1 billion. How does a country manage such a huge population and be able to address the various needs?
You're absolutely right, Mr. Stober. When India got independence, we were 330 million people. Today we are 1.34 billion people, and we are like Nigeria. India is also a multi-ethnic, multicultural, multilinguistic society, multi-religious society. So we, from the whole of India, it has been better described as a subcontinent rather than as a country. So many of us have come together. There are 22 official languages as per our constitution, and each state has been divided. In 1956 there was a state reorganization, and each state has been divided into a geographical entity which has more or less similar culture and same language. So like, for example, Maharashtra speaks Marathi, West Bengal speaks Bengali, Gujarat speaks Gujarati, Madhya Pradesh speaks Hindi, Uttar Pradesh speaks Hindi, Tamil Nadu speaks Tamil. So each of these states were reorganized based on the language, and with the language comes the culture, the cuisine, the dressing, and the shape and the size of the people. So all these people came together, but the idea of India had been existing throughout, and it had been an example of unity in diversity, as we proudly say, where everyone is respected and everybody is taken along. The inclusivity in the concept of development has been one of the forefront. It was in the forefront for the continued development. But yes, it was not an easy journey. From what we were in 1947, today we have risen to the level of the 5th largest economy in the world. This has come up not easily. It has come up with concerted efforts by respective successive governments over a period of 30-40 years. When we got independence, we did not have food security. Today, we have actually got food security for 5 times the number of people that we had at that point of time, and we are also exporting food outside. So this has come in through green revolution, white revolution, and so on and so forth. So there has been a concerted effort by the successive governments in tackling issues that are essential for the growth of the country, and the results are coming. We still have a long way to go. I do not say that we have reached. We still have a long way to go, but we are, I would say, on the right path, and with more push and more effort, we would certainly reach where we want to.
You know, it's interesting you talk about food security, and that was exactly where I was going to go next and say, with such a huge population, feeding them would definitely be a huge task itself, and certainly India must have found a way through its agricultural practices from traditional methods. It must have moved on to more modern methods. So now there are other countries that are still grappling with issues of food security. What is the Indian experience? What can be learned from what you've done?
Initially, I'm at the peril of repeating myself, I'm saying this. Initially, we did not have food security. We had to rely on outside help. So in 70s, the government decided that we need to address this head on. And so we sought assistance. There was one Mr. Norman Borlaug, who was an agricultural specialist from the United States. He had come in, and with his technical expertise, the whole government of India had set up various institutes, and we started something called as a green revolution with increased fertilizer usage, as well as better practices that were being told to the farmers. The green revolution came into being, and that had moved on continuously. Nearly 50% of India's arable land is under cultivation, and that has been because of the best practices that have been adopted and the green revolution. We have been able to produce more from the same amount of land. I wouldn't say that we have adopted completely modern technology throughout, because land holding in India continues to be very small, from 1 acre, 1 hectare, half a hectare, so on and so forth, because traditionally, the land has been passed on through generations, from father to son to daughter to others. So it has reduced. But the best practices that have been brought into play, the government's effort in teaching, in instituting various mechanisms in terms of FPOs, for example, farmer producer organizations, or in agricultural research institutes which bring in new varieties of seeds, hybrids and other things, and continuous supply. There was also this minimum support price which was done, because when a farmer produces, he or she has to have profit out of it. So instead of relying completely on the market, the government came in with a minimum support price. So these are some of the mechanisms that have been put in place, which has certainly ensured better living quality for the farmers as well as food security for the nation.
Well, so interesting. But again, India has gone on and recorded successes in many fields. And some of them I'd like to talk about because they also have a bearing on Nigeria. Advances in medicine. And India became a hub for medical tourism. And many nations still grapple with their health systems. But India moved on. And even in terms of trade, when we look at it, pharmaceuticals constitute a huge part of what India sends to Nigeria. Let's look at the advances in medicine in India.
Can I step back a little and say how we had come about the whole concept? The sense that the kind of development that had happened, governments had concentrated on, I would say, they concentrated on every area, but the thrust was certainly on 5 different areas. The first one was education. The first one was agriculture, because India continues to be an agrarian society, although our GDP, the maximum contribution actually comes from services today, but we continue to be an agrarian society. India lives in its villages. And so we've concentrated on agriculture that is required for food security and feeding people everywhere. Next, we concentrated on education. So there were a large number of schools, primary and higher educational societies which have been set up. The third they concentrated was on health, because you feed a person, you educate a person, and you keep the person healthy. And then you concentrate on the employment generation, which was the MSME, the medium and small enterprises. 70% of India's economy run on these MSMEs. And finally, the infrastructure. So whatever the MSME produces will have to be taken around, distributed and exported. So infrastructure, whether it is port, road or air network or anything of that sort. So agriculture, education, health, employment and infrastructure were the basic thrust areas which have actually helped, I would say, India to be where we are today. In doing so, health is one of the most important aspects, wherein with a large population and spread out in such a large country as such, it was very important for us to have, starting it with PHCs, the primary health care centers. So, and when the primary healthcare centers, the secondary and tertiary network was built. Many medical institutions have been created along with hospitals. As we speak, it is again 70% of India's healthcare is in the private sector. Okay. And so the GP who passes out of one of the universities and sets his or her shop over there, the clinic takes care of about, say, 1,000, 2,000 people in that area. So there are various such GPs who are there. The primary healthcare centers, still we found that the maternal mortality, the infant mortality, things were to be addressed properly. The vaccination program had to be addressed properly. So we created a network of workers called as ASHA workers. It's an Hindi acronym. ASHA workers means they would be a lady in a particular village would be identified, and she would be given the responsibility of keeping tab of, say, 3 villages, 5 villages, and she would go around and round and round and inform the activities that the government has been bringing in, and getting people to come over to the PHCs and the secondary care. So this kind of a network helped in terms of addressing the basic issues of maternal and infant mortality. It has now reduced to a great extent. Life expectancy has increased. So the setup of PHCs, the tertiary institutions, and the possibility that 70% of our infrastructure, health infrastructure, is with private hands have helped that. This has not only assisted the country in ensuring the health for its own people, but the investment that had come in, which is world class. Today, I can say that India has got one of the best healthcare facilities, affordable and good quality. If we speak about it, from Nigeria, actually, we send about 45% of the visas that I issue are medical visas.
All right, so that of course would even take us to the relations which India over time has enjoyed with Nigeria. Many similarities, you've identified some of them too. Nigeria is also a multicultural, multi-religious and multilingual country with a huge population as well, at least
True.
Some 200 plus million citizens. It's the largest in Africa. And the relations between these two countries dates as far back as, from what we see in the records, some 2 years, even before Nigeria's independence. Now, how has this grown over time?
India and Nigeria are natural partners. We have a lot of commonalities, similarities. We had a similar past, colonial past. We came out of colonial rule. We came out in 1947, you came out in 1960. You are the largest, as you rightly said, in Africa. You are the giant of Africa. Our leadership had identified the potential and the capability of Nigeria 2 years in advance to your independence. And in 58, we set up our diplomatic representation in Lagos. And from there till today, in the past 64 years that we have been together, 66 years that we have been together, we have had wonderful political, economic, cultural, people-to-people contact. The relationship has been growing from strength to strength. We have had excellent contacts at the highest level. The last visit was, of course, a little earlier, back in 2015, when President Muhammadu Buhari had visited India for the India-Africa Forum Summit. Our Prime Minister had come over here. Dr. Manmohan Singh had visited Nigeria. We have had regular contacts. Capacity building is something that we are very happy about. And we have something called as the Indian Technical and Economic Cooperation, which we started in 1964. And we train short-term and long-term courses for, basically these are short-term courses. We have separate system for long-term courses also. Many thousands of Nigerian friends have availed of this facility, and we are very proud of that, both in the civilian side and in the defense side. Economically, if you see, India has more than 135 companies which have made Nigeria as its base. They are into manufacturing. Most of them into manufacturing, including pharmaceuticals. Yeah. Their investment is about $19 billion total, of which pharmaceuticals alone is about $3 billion. I have visited some of the factories in Lagos also. They are, anecdotally speaking, the second largest employer after the Nigerian government. And so 50,000-60,000 of Indians are staying in Nigeria, and an equal number, about 55,000, are staying in India from Nigeria. So Nigeria has been the home for many of my compatriots, and that has been possible because of the warmth and the friendliness and the hospitality that you have been extending. So people-to-people contact, economic relations, cultural relations, we have been having constant exchange of troops to and between India and Nigeria. Bollywood is something that is certainly binding all of us together. Right. Nollywood is a very strong Nigerian film industry. Nollywood is now going to Bollywood. As we speak, there is a Nollywood Goes to India, Postcards from India. It's the name of a movie. The same producer who produced Namaste Wahala is now shooting in India. So the music industry, the entertainment industry, Nollywood and Bollywood, there are a lot of similarities, and there are a lot of issues which are common. So we have been having a wonderful relationship between our two countries without any problem.
Speaking about Nollywood and Bollywood and the relations and culture, I know that one of the institutions you have visited since your resumption of duty in Nigeria is the Nigerian Television Authority.
Yes.
And it's natural to find out what are the areas of collaboration and cooperation you're looking at with the media in Nigeria, particularly the NTA.
You are one of the important pillars of democracy, media. And in India, media is very free, very open, and it's very strong. Sometimes they even call it as the chaotic media. But so be it. That is the fourth estate, and we have to have one of the stronger pillars of democracy being so. Like NTA, which is the largest television network in not only in Nigeria but also in Africa, we have Doordarshan. Doordarshan is the Hindi name for television. And I think we can have wonderful cooperation of exchange programs between our two countries, particularly from the Doordarshan of India. Like NTA, Doordarshan also has got various verticals, from sports to news to movies to current affairs to regional languages. It has also grown exactly in the same manner and has got a wider audience. It is time that we have further cooperation, and not only in terms of exchange of information and programs, but also co-production, joint production of programs can perhaps happen. Training can certainly happen. Capacity building can certainly, we can learn from each other's experiences. And on the print side, obviously, NAN has got already a tie-up with ANI in India. We are now working, ANI is the news network in India.
Right.
Similarly, PTI, Press Trust of India, is another major news collaborator, collator I should say. And so Press Trust of India, we are now working with between NAN and PTA to have a memorandum of understanding. So media industry is a place where opinions are formed, is a place where information is shared, and it's a place where certainly two countries can come together to showcase as to the developmental activities that both the countries do individually and bilaterally and internationally also. So we are looking towards further strengthening this cooperation.
Well, the media plays a great role in education too, and I see that there's a lot in the area of education. Many Nigerians are moving to Indian institutions, and I easily recall that at the celebration of India's Republic Day in Nigeria here, there were a number of Nigerian students studying in India who performed on stage, and
True.
that was something to behold.
True. We have, as I told you, this educational cooperation called as the iTech, which is a short-term course for 6 months to 6 weeks to 4 weeks. It depends. And about there are 200 different areas in which we train people. But that is exclusively for people who are already working for skill enhancement. We also have various universities, and this cooperation has been traditional. In 1962, when our Prime Minister at that point of time had come in, this concept of capacity building was given the thrust. So there were large number of Indian teachers who came over to Nigeria to teach in secondary education, secondary schools, and also in universities. I have now come across senior bureaucrats and politicians and many other friends of Nigeria who have said that they have had an English teacher from India, a physics teacher from India, so on and so forth. And this continued till, I think, early 90s. So education has been traditionally a major point between our two countries. National Defence Academy in Kaduna and the Naval War College in Port Harcourt were jointly built by India and Nigeria. And so it is but natural that Indian universities also attract Nigerian students. And I remember when I was in school, I had a Nigerian classmate. I now don't know where he is, but I do have. So that goes, it has been traditionally a good collaboration between our two countries.
Also, speaking of that, I also recall, now that you mentioned the Nigerian Defense Academy, I also recall that there is also a high level of collaboration between, I mean, militarily, between the Indian Navy and the Nigerian Navy, and which has seen many naval personnel undergo courses in India. So let's look at that.
Certainly. As I told you, capacity building has been one of the major points between our two countries, and that has extended not only in the civilian side but also into the defense side. On an average, in every year, we give about 150 scholarships under the defense side for people to go and do courses in India. And whether it is in the higher command course, or whether it is in the Defense Services College or in the National Defense Academy, we have had senior military officials from Nigeria to participate in those courses. And we are even proud of the fact that the current President of Nigeria is also an alumni of one of the institutes. He studied for 1 year there. And the CAS, the Chief of Air Staff, is also part of the same thing. So similarly, there are hundreds of military officers who have trained there. Navy is no exception, obviously. And particularly in the recent case when the piracy issues in the Gulf of Guinea had come up, India had also been collaborating along with other world powers with Nigeria in addressing this particular issue. As recent as September 2022, INS Tarkash is one of our frigates which had come over here, exercised along with the Nigerian Navy in the Gulf of Guinea, and paid a courtesy visit, a goodwill visit, and had returned. And this was the third time that INS Tarkash herself had come to Nigerian waters in the past about 4 years. And so we have been having good cooperation, and we are also training various naval cadets and officers in India too.
All right. Well, there's so many areas where we still must touch on. We also would like to look at one aspect of it. You described India as the father of democracy.
Mother of democracy.
The mother of democracy. And as you well know, Nigeria is also under democratic governance. We'll touch on that and compare notes and see just how both countries have deepened democracy on their shores. But at this point, we'll take a short break. When we return, we'll have more issues to discuss. Stay with us.
Or Saturday Delight, going to places from the obscure to the hinterland and cities, bringing you development stories and perspectives, connecting the people with government and stakeholders on critical issues of our national life.
We are live in Abuja.
It's 9 p.m. every Saturday on the network service of the NTA. Weekend File. You can't afford to miss it.
Why should we be in a difficult situation financially?
Once upon a time we were rich, but we're not a rich country anymore.
Disaster management is everybody's business.
In all these times, the organization turned to Nigeria.
We would as much want to harness the capacity that is within us so that we see how we can become self-reliant.
1 month ended and you said you are increasing warning strike by 2 months. I mean, you are incubating madness. Even if these are officials of government who have been told to go and enforce the law and they have gone against the law itself, they must be held accountable.
One-on-One, Friday, 10:30 p.m. on NTA Network.
Thanks for staying with us. I'm still here with India's High Commissioner to Nigeria, His Excellency G. Balasubramanian, who's been talking about Nigeria-India relations and other matters. Now, India has done well for itself in the field of technology, for instance, and these are areas that we might want to look at what parallels and we can draw from that? We do know that we've seen Indian vehicles on Nigerian roads. Nigeria also has taken a huge step to go into the auto industry as well. But let's see how India developed its.
On technology, yes, consumer-based goods and utility-based goods. These are two areas in which India had concentrated. India is one of the leaders in software today. ICT, which is hallmark for Indian manufacturing and service industry. Space and nuclear technology. These are two more areas in which India has developed its own indigenous capabilities. Engineering goods, yes, certainly. I'm also, having been here in Nigeria for the past 6 months, have been witness to many of the Indian Okadas. All your nearly 74% of your Okadas are India-based, the Bajaj company or TVS, and so are the three-wheelers. TVS company has got a major shareholding in the three-wheelers that ply, auto rickshaws that ply on Nigerian roads. In addition to that, we also have not only these, but also we have various electrical equipments which come over here, light machinery, engineering machinery goods which come over here, whether it is in poultry or in milk, dairy farming, and so on and so forth. And so engineering goods is one of the largest supplies that we do in terms of our exports to Nigeria. These things have actually, as I told you, the 5 areas in which we had concentrated. With education, it was possible for MSMEs to actually get technically qualified people into their system so that these technological issues started developing. ICT, we started fiber optic network way back in 80s, and when the Y2K problem came up, and with the technological institutes that have been created in between, it provided us with one of the better opportunities to exploit the available opportunity. And Indian children, I would say, are a little more tuned towards STEM, the science and technology educational system, mathematics, engineering and mathematics. And so that helped them in the technological advances. Indigenously, we have been preparing and manufacturing various things. We cooperated and collaborated with various other companies. For example, the vehicle system did not come about by itself. We collaborated with Japan and Korea in terms of their manufacturing capabilities, which were set up in India. Over a period of years, the whole system developed, and now those companies are independent of their initial collaborators. So it is a process which took place over a period of 30-40 years, and today India can boast itself of one of the affordable and quality suppliers of engineering goods almost in all areas of in all the fields.
We mentioned earlier on that we would talk on democracy and probably compare notes. India, large democracy, the mother of democracy, as you say, and Nigeria, a large democracy in itself. But there have been challenges to the concept of democracy all over the world, where in spite of all efforts, it's still felt that it's a representation, a small group of people given the opportunity to exercise control over the larger society. And again, numbers count. But how has India been able to manage and grow its democracy, deepen democratic tenets with such a huge and diverse population?
Where I can put it in 2 different ways. One is civilizational. As I told you, being the mother of democracy, the traditions of democracy have been imbibed in the culture for many millennia, literally. And therefore, when we adopted ourselves as a republic after independence, it was but natural for the whole process to continue. And there were institutional setups that have also been created, whether it is the parliament, or the constitution, which is the law of the land in every country. And in the Indian constitution is one of the largest, and it has adapted from the best practices of most of the countries which have which have adopted a constitution, written or unwritten. So we have taken many unwritten rules and regulations that exist in the United Kingdom. We have taken it from Ireland, we have taken it from United States and various other places. So our constitution, which forms the law of the land, which forms the backbone of the democracy, ensures that right to equality, the fundamental rights which are the right to life, right to equality, liberty, so on and so forth. There are about 7 fundamental rights which have been created. The judicial system has been given total independence as per the constitution. And they are also very strong in their system. We have a, like INEC, we have a CEC, the Chief Election Commission. And that Chief Election Commission oversees and supervises and ensures that the elections are done free and fair. It's a large democracy. Last time in 2019, the total number of registered voters in India were 915 million. And our system is such that the election commission conducts election in phases. It is quite impossible physically to have all the 915. Obviously, all 915 million voters won't come to vote. And being a large country, it is held in different phases. So in one particular state itself, the election can spread out between 2 to 7 different dates. And all those things are under the electronic voting machine. So we adopted this electronic voting machine some 3 decades earlier, and it has matured well. People initially, obviously, when interaction between man and machine comes in, there's always a little skepticism and suspicion which is there. But all those things have been addressed, and people now rely completely. So although in 7 different phases, because we need to provide security, move forces from one place to another, and allow people to vote peacefully. These are done in 7 phases, or 5 phases, or 3 phases, depending upon the population of that particular area. And all the voting machines are then secured, and election results are announced after all the electoral process is over throughout the country for the parliamentary system. So the institutional mechanisms are there, the civilizational ethos are there, and independent judiciary and election commission ensure that all these things come into place. So in spite of the diversity, in spite of the multiple parties that we have in the country, it has been quite a smooth process. Obviously, there can be law and order situation from time to time, but those are addressed as law and order situation and never as a threat to democracy. So when the current government, current in the sense that the then incumbent government wins or loses, the next day we have a fresh government in place. They move away smoothly, and they come in without any problems.
I was going to ask, say, how conflictual is the process in India? Do you go through conflicts? And in some democracies, elections are very difficult periods, and they often lead to conflicts which stretch over months. But you don't go through that, do you?
In India, we call elections as a festival. So it's actually a very major way in which people participate in the electoral process. Yes, there can be issues that can be raised, and they are addressed judicially or through the election commission, quasi-judicially. And so redressal mechanisms are very strong, and if there has been a delay, it would only be in a particular constituency, because we follow a parliamentary system in which people elect their members of parliament, and the members of parliament then form whichever is the largest, whichever party gets the largest number of members of parliament forms the government. So we do not vote for one person, we vote for multiple people, and therefore the conflict is so disseminated in the sense that not everywhere would there be a conflict. Right. And when there is a conflict, we have institutional mechanisms and constitutional ways to tackle them. And they have been quite smooth, I should say.
Well, you do say you built your models with 1 or 2 experiences drawn from different parts of the world. So you would naturally be an advocate of what might be referred to as homegrown democratic ideals. which some countries have had challenges with, as adopting what might work in some other part and might not work in this. Do you subscribe to that? That countries should just evolve something that is suited to their peculiar situations?
The proverb may certainly go as the food for the goose is the food for the gander, but not necessarily, because you do not have only geese and gander. You also have crows and parrots also. So the civilizational ethos, the traditions, the culture of every country will have an impact on the processes which they adopt, whether it is political or educational or any process that they adopt, whether it is a marriage ceremony or whether it is an electoral process. There are cultural issues which certainly play a major part, and I am also personally of the firm opinion that democracies evolve. Every country has to identify its own set of values which they will adhere to over a period of years. So one person's democracy need not necessarily be exactly in the same manner adopted by another.
So there's no matter of one size fits all.
Absolutely.
Well, Your Excellency, Nigeria and India have enjoyed good relations over time, so you have acknowledged yourself. So what we look at the future and say, what are those areas that India and Nigeria can forge better relations, more balanced trade relations? Currently, India exports more.
No.
India imports more from Nigeria than Nigeria imports from India. So what is the future like in balancing these trade deficits?
We purchase a sufficient large amount of oil from you, nearly $10 billion worth of oil. Petroleum products is what Nigeria supplies to India, and we send about $4.5 to $5 billion worth of various goods, including pharmaceuticals, engineering goods, other minerals which are exported, so on and so forth, plastics, textiles, so on and so forth. We need to actually look at traditional areas of trade and economic cooperation. We have exploited for the past about 3-4 decades with various companies of India working in Nigeria for a long period. We need to look at few new areas which are coming up, whether it is artificial intelligence or whether it is technology-based solutions for problems, because you and I have many common issues, and whatever we have gone through, whatever we have experienced, where we fell and we rose once again, you need not fall at the same place. You can actually learn from those experiences. So technology-based solutions, innovative solutions, startups. India is a major player in startups today, with more than 100 unicorns in the past 2 years and more than 500 startups that have come up. India is the startup capital of the world today. So technology-based solutions, ICT areas particularly, and space and other technology areas. We are going to have further cooperation between our two space agencies, for which we signed a memorandum of understanding also. So these are areas, new areas, startups and others, in which we would be in a position to cooperate further to expand the existing trade and economic cooperation, which can certainly at some point of time address the issue of trade imbalance.
Right. There was a slight drop in the volume and the amount of money accruing from those in I think in the last 2 years or thereabouts.
Yes. During the COVID time, yes, there was a significant fall, up to $8.8 billion where was the trade between our two countries. But the strength in our relationship is evident from the fact that within the next year, we grew another 36%, and currently we stay at around $14.95 billion. From 8.8 we have actually grown subsequently after a dip. So the inherent strength between our two countries continue to be there. The foundation is quite good, and therefore bouncing back into the trade volume and increasing the trade volume has never been a problem, has not been a problem last year. This year, certainly, we are looking to do better, but various other external factors also have an impact on the trade issues. So we might see a little dip somewhere, but being compensated in other areas of the trade relationship.
Speaking of which, brings me to the matter that India and Nigeria are not insulated from global events, some which have impacted negatively on global economies, not the least the pandemic, and of course the current war between Russia and Ukraine, which has led to a slight dip in economies. Now, as countries continue to struggle to grapple with addressing a slowdown in their economies, what is India's response, and taking into cognizance its relations with its friends such as Nigeria to these global challenges?
You're absolutely right. There are various black swan events which come into play and which are totally unexpected. Pandemic was one of the major things which made everyone realize, including India, that the supply chain part of it will have to be ensured. Relying on existing mechanisms alone and traditionally what has been happening need not necessarily continue also. So the supply chain management issues were something that came into the forefront with pandemic, and also the conflict in Ukraine and between Ukraine and Russia also. So the supply side is most important. We'll have to diversify our supply chains and ensure that local hubs are created at different places. And also look at new players who will be coming into play. So in that direction, initially when the pandemic affected, our economy also was affected to a great extent because of the supply chain problems, and we adapted fast, and we had created hubs from where we were in a position to supply to various other places, and we started the pharmaceutical part of it, particularly the vaccines. We were able to create vaccines, whether indigenously develop a vaccine, also from AstraZeneca get the licensed production by SII, Serum Institute of India. And we once again became the pharmacy of the world. So those are some of the immediate moves that will have to be undertaken by the governments and adapted by the people to continue to be relevant in the changed situation. So whether it is supply of wheat, whether it is supply of pharmaceutical products or equipments, we also imported when it was required and developed the capability. So this is something that self-reliance is something that we will have to work on in a globalized environment.
Right. We started off discussing about India's efforts to lift some 300 million out of poverty, and of course relying heavily on the MSMEs. As you do know, Nigeria is working, this government is working to lift about 100 million Nigerians out of poverty. And here also there is a concerted effort in developing the MSMEs as the drivers of the economy. What are the lessons that what countries can draw from each other in this experience?
We felt, I mean, there will be certainly various other aspects of it also, but one of it is certainly that not everybody needs to be an engineer or a doctor. That you need an electrician, you need a plumber, you need a technician. So the vocational education is something which can certainly help people not only earn their living but also develop the economy of the country. And it need not necessarily, if you take agriculture, it need not necessarily be mechanization. Because of the small land holdings, it might not work out also. So in developing agriculture, best practices to be taken in, better utilization, crop rotation, so on and so forth can be brought in. So the experiences gained in addressing economic issues should start probably in a dissipated manner, in a small way, which can certainly at some point of time create a threshold which will cross a threshold, and then the whole movement will move faster. But initially with education and MSME, small vocational training colleges, vocational trainers, and adapting good practices and established best practices in manufacturing or agriculture or education, wherever you see. If you adopt best practices, it will yield, and that is how it takes time. It certainly is not overnight. It takes time, but a concerted effort is needed.
Well, the last of the key areas we talked about is infrastructure, and that interests me a lot because, as is quite evident, Nigeria is working to address the huge infrastructure deficit which it suffers, and especially in terms of power, to drive the growth of industry, which of course would impact on the entire populace. India had to go through this period of addressing its infrastructure deficit. Sometimes policies by governments are not entirely painless. What is the best method? How did India get through it without social upheavals in swallowing the bitter pills?
Yes. I would explain, I would like to show the experience of India over a period of time in terms of when in 1991, when we had a crunch in the foreign exchange reserve, then we had to adapt and open up very fast. The license Raj, which was existing till then, had to be dismantled, and we globalized faster. Technology certainly helps in improving, whether it is infrastructure or whether it is globalization. Certainly technology improves, helps in improving, and over a period of time, in terms of employment generation, in terms of infrastructure development, slowly. Today, we have more than 68,000 kilometers of train network. Initially, we were running it on coal and diesel. Today, 85% of those rail network in the country is electrified. We have more than 406 gigawatts of installed capacities, of which under the climate change agreement that we had agreed upon, 40% of it had to be from renewable energy by 2030. We have already achieved that 40%. India is today one of the major players in renewable energy, particularly solar energy and wind energy. So adapting to the technology to suit the current requirement, because initially when calculators came in or computers came in, people thought that our jobs would be going. So that is not exactly how it works. It only adds up. Today, if artificial intelligence is also seen as a threat, but you will have to use it for our own betterment. And in that way, adapting to technology has been one of the stronger points of Indian populace, I would say, and the efforts of the government. And so whether it is energy, whether it is infrastructure, they have been concentrating, and over a period of many years we have done. Even today we have actually presented the budget, and there is an important thrust that is given for further improving the infrastructure of the country. So road network and other ports, road network are being constructed.
One thing we must not forget is the international cooperation, and in terms of what Nigeria and India have stood for over the years, particularly in the membership of the G20 countries.
That's true. India and Nigeria, as I already told, are natural partners, and our viewpoints on the international relations also coincide. We are more or less on the same page on almost every issue. We are members of G77, we are members of L69, we are members, we have been members of the non-aligned movement, and so our positions coincide in most of the issues internationally, and we have been helping each other out in the international and the multilateral forums, and also in the United Nations. India assumed the presidency of G20 in December 2022, and we will be having this G20 summit in September 2023, 9th and 10th of September 2023, and we would be having the president of Nigeria come over for the summit in G20, because we have invited Nigeria, given the special relationship that India enjoys with Nigeria. Nigeria has been invited as a guest country for the G20 summit and the other meetings that are taking place under G20. So we are very happy that Nigeria is participating enthusiastically, and already more than it's already 2 months, and we have had nearly 22 meetings already, and with good participation from Nigeria. This would be one of the major areas, thrust areas, because last year it was Indonesia which held the presidency. This year it is India. Next year it would be Brazil. With 3 developing economies, emerging economies holding the presidency, it is the best opportunity for the world to hear the perspectives and the priorities of the developing world. And in that connection, our Prime Minister had even called a Voice of the Global South Summit in a virtual mode, and I'm very happy to say that His Excellency Mr. Muhammadu Buhari, the President of the Republic of Nigeria, had also participated on 13th of January in the concluding session and conveyed his views. The thrust of India is to bring together the voice of the South to the table of G20, where policies are decided for the rest of the world also. So this is something in which we would be cooperating closely, and we are happy that Nigeria is part of this journey.
There's so many more things to talk about between India and Nigeria. But we hope that some other time we'll expand this conversation and request Your Excellency to come again so we can explore further how to deepen Nigeria-India relations as we move forward. For now, I'd like to thank you for being a guest on One-on-One. And we hope you'll come again. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me, and namaskar.
Thank you. And that's our program today. We thank you for watching. Next week, we'll be back with One-on-One. I'm Cyril Stover. Continue to stay safe.